The styles are named after the main monument of their period. And the Asian Art Museum, Shiva and Parvati, have always been mostly associated with the Bapuan style. This is the Bapuan temple, and we'll look at it a little bit. As I suggested earlier, and I'll bring this up again a little bit more in a few minutes, I actually now think that they're earlier than the Bapuan temple. But anyway, we're only talking about a generation or two. So it's worth looking at the Bapuan temple. Maybe some of you have seen it. It was largely closed for many, many, many decades because the Cambodian and French teams were trying to stabilize it and conserve it, and it reopened 2 or 3 years ago. So you can now go and have a good look at all of it. Here it is, one of the main temple mountains in Angkor, dedicated to Shiva. Here's its plan. So it has the characteristic arrangement of a central tower and 4 towers at the 4 corners. The central tower is largely gone these days, but there's plenty of indication that it used to be there. And here's a reconstructed drawing of what it is thought to have looked like. So central tower, corner towers, midpoint towers, another set of corner and midpoint towers, all lifted up on a big step pyramid. Here's another view of what it may have looked like. So this is approximately within a generation or so, approximately the kind of architectural context that the Shiva and Parvati would have come from. Obviously we don't know what temple they came from, and no reason to think in particular that they came from the Bapuan, but it's the main temple of, I suspect, a period slightly after them, and I wanted to show it to you as an indication. Because for the Cléang, what the French called the Cléang period, one of the problems about the period just before the Bapuan, what the French call the Bapuan period, one of the problems with it is that there is no major architectural monument, and there's only a very small group of sculptures that the French attribute to this period around the year 1000. So, and it seems to have been a period in Cambodia of very considerable political unrest. There's a king who reigns only for a few months, and then there seem to be 2 different kings reigning in different places at the same time. So when you put together the possibility of political instability with the fact that there is no major monument surviving and relatively little sculpture surviving from that particular period, it makes the study, a comparative study, unusually challenging. One of the great things about the Bapuan temple is that it has huge areas of reliefs, of stories from the life of Krishna and the life of Rama. There's great, lots and lots of reliefs of the Cambodian version of the Rama story. And obviously, back to this question of how do you date things, if you can date the temple by what king it's associated with, if you know the dates of the king, or if there's an inscription or some other evidence that allows you to date the temple, and if the temple has sculpture on it, then you can study the costumes, the jewelry, the ear pendants, and so on the temple in comparison with freestanding sculptures, and maybe be able to say, okay, this freestanding sculpture is similar enough in its dress, its jewelry, its so on and so on, to this temple that it must be of the same period. We have one very interesting piece that's definitely of the Bapuan period, and it has on it 4 scenes from the life of Krishna. It's a boundary stone with scenes carved on 4 sides. Unfortunately, it's very, very weathered. It hasn't been on view in a very, very, very long time, and I doubt that we'll put it on view because unfortunately it's so weathered that it doesn't make very much impact for a general public. I wanted to show you a few other works of the general period that we can compare our Shiva and Parvati to. Here's one in the Musée Guimet, and you see that it has this butterfly-shaped thing here. So, you know, the rolled up front of the cloth has been passed through the legs and pulled up. That's what we're seeing here, pulled up. And then it's secured by the belt. And those ends of it are fanned out above the top of the belt to make this sort of butterfly shape. And it seems that, you'll see again in a minute on our sculpture, that it's relatively close to the body. It seems that one of the developments is that going forward in time, it gets more and more, it gets higher in relief off the lower back. So it seems that in general, earlier ones have this butterfly set of fanned out pleats rather close to the lower back, and then it gets bigger and more elaborate and sticks out further as you go forward in time. We've only been looking at stone sculpture. There are some really splendid bronze sculptures surviving from the 11th century, 1000 to 1100 more or less. And I wanted to show you a few just to give you a sense of the accomplishments in bronze of this period. The central point is that the period between 1000 and 1100 was a period of at the highest level, and of course in every period there's, you know, A level, B level, C level sculptors at work, patrons who are willing to pay top price or middle price or bottom price for things. So there's always going to be a range of quality. But at the top level of quality, the 11th century is a period of enormous, enormous accomplishment in Cambodian sculpture. Amazing, eh? Makes your hair stand on end. You must go see it at the Met next time you're there. And even more so, this fantastic gilded bronze of Shiva. And again, the only way we know it's Shiva is that it's got a third eye in the middle of the forehead. The largest and most imposing and most beautiful ancient Cambodian bronze of all is this one that's in the National Museum in Phnom Penh. Maybe you've read about it. It's Vishnu lying on the cosmic ocean, and this bronze was in the middle of a huge water tank, recreating the idea of Vishnu reclining on the cosmic ocean. And you can't believe how huge it is. I mean, it is huge. And think back to Europe. There's very little freestanding stone sculpture in Europe in this period of the 11th century, and there's no large-scale figural bronze casting in Europe at this period. It's not until the beginnings of the Renaissance that large-scale, life-size or over life-size figural cast bronzes start appearing in Europe. So this is not only a great artistic accomplishment, but an amazing technological accomplishment in 11th century Cambodia. And then this one, very important because it has an inscribed date of 1044. So, and it's very, very, very rare for a sculpture to have an inscribed date on it. I've never seen this one in real life, but am very eager to someday. So 1044, and you can see how high the butterfly pleats stand off the back. Now, of course, this is easier to do in bronze than it is to do in stone. That's part of what's going on. But it suggests that through the course of the 11th century, the butterfly pleats are standing off, getting emphasized and standing free of the lower back more. So just to review, this is where our sculpture traditionally has been put, and I'm now guessing that it actually belongs in the previous period. But these categories were invented by the French. They're not hard and fast. They're part of a continuum, of course, so we have to not treat them as though they're not treat them as though they are firmer or more definite than they really are. Here is a stone sculpture of the Cléang period that's in the Musée Guimet in Paris, and I am struck by the similarity of the faces, among other things. The dress is quite different. That's okay. It's perfectly possible in various periods to have the diadem or not, to have the garment with this kind of arrangement versus the kind of arrangement in our sculpture. Both arrangements are possible in most periods, although in most periods one is more prevalent, more common than the other. But what I'm struck by is the general similarity of the faces. And so this, plus a bunch of other evidence, suggests to me that our sculpture is of what the French would call the Cléang period. Now, some works in our own collection to compare to. One of our few freestanding images of Shiva bronze from India, later than the Cambodian one. More like in its formal standing straight up form, more like the Cambodian one is this Chola one from India. But this general form of Shiva revealing himself out of the side of the linga is virtually unknown in Cambodia. I can't say unknown because I think, in fact, it does appear in one or two contexts, but it's very, very, very unusual in India, in Cambodia. Common enough in India, but very, very unusual in Cambodia. And then Shiva, the so-called south-facing Shiva as a divine teacher, quite common in Chola sculpture from India of about the same period, little after or a little before, of the Cambodian Shiva and Parvati. Again, this is a form that does not turn up or turns up very, 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 very seldom in Cambodia. And then later, but there are examples in India earlier, Shiva in one of his kind of horrific forms where there's this complicated combination of horrific bits, the snakes, the garland of skulls, the skull attached to the figure's hand, and so on, and combined with a great sensuousness. Again, a figure that turns up very, 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 very seldom in Cambodia. So there's a number of rather common forms of Shiva, that are quite common in India that do not turn up very much in Cambodia. These two are not very far apart in the galleries, and I think some of you who are docents may use these as a comparison. They're a good comparison and contrast. Probably also Parvati from earlier, 50 years, 75 years, 100 years earlier than this one. And here's that contrast of very formal, very emphasizing distance and might and awesomeness versus emphasizing more approachability, more of a sense of a figure that we could potentially love as opposed to be in awe of. And then someone reminded me at break to talk about how do we know they're a pair. Well, we know they're a pair because all those details that I was showing you at the very beginning, all of the details of the jewelry and the way the pleating is done, the way the hair is braided and so on, it's so close in every detail that it's impossible to imagine that they're not a pair. If you look at other Cambodian sculptures of this period of Shiva or Parvati, they are enough different that you would never imagine that they could be a pair with either of these. So these are so alike in all of their tiniest details that we feel they must be a pair. They're a little bit different color for two reasons. The Shiva has been cleaned a lot more than the Parvati has, so it has less dirt on it. And the other thing is the actual stone is a little bit different color. And when the stone has been analyzed by specialist museum conservators who specialize in ancient Cambodian sculpture, they confirm that the stone is a little bit different color, but they also confirm that it's not at all unusual in a quarry to have rather different colors of stone at different levels in the quarry. So the rather different color of the stone is not in itself an indication that they couldn't be a pair. We see Shiva and Parvati with their children, sometimes in India, as in this later bronze set in our own collection. I say their children. You know, Shiva and Parvati had this rather tumultuous relationship. It's like Zeus and Hera, or opera lovers, Wotan and Fricka, you know, these power couples who can barely stand each other a lot of the time, and are constantly in arguments about, you know, you're sleeping around, no, you're sleeping around, you've done thus and such that I don't like, no, you've done thus and such that I don't like. They have a very, very tumultuous relationship, and the two children that are associated with them, Skanda, the little boy that we see here, and elephant-headed Ganesha, neither one of them is the children of both of them. They never successfully produced a child that belonged to both of them. Shiva is a great ascetic, as you know. He's a yogi, and so there's all this stuff about, you know, preserving and holding in your bodily fluids and so on. And he's an ascetic. And so being married to an ascetic is, I think, no fun. And it was, you know, it was a problem in their relationship, and they you know, they're not the ideal happily married couple, but we see them as a couple a lot. We see them with their children, but we can't think of them in very big terms. We can't think of them as a kind of idealized, stereotypical mother-father figure from whom we are all descended. They're not Adam and Eve. They're not, in other religions, you know, there's a great male deity and a great female deity, and through their union, all of humankind is understood to be descended from them. This doesn't work with Shiva and Parvati because they never managed to have a child together. And so they, even though we see them as a family sometimes in India and occasionally in Cambodia, they are not the original progenitors of the entire human race. This one, unfortunately, not in our museum, if only it were. But here we have Shiva and Parvati together in a sculpture in our museum. His ascetic qualities are emphasized by his ascetic's hairdress. His reproductive qualities are associated with his erect penis and the bull that has male reproductive power, of course. But he's chucking his wife under the chin, stroking her under the chin in a very affectionate way. And this kind of thing does appear in Cambodia, where we have Parvati sitting affectionately on the knee of her husband. And the most famous one of these, of course, is at Bante Sray, that very, very, very beautiful mid-10th century monument in Angkor. Not a royal monument, an aristocratic monument, but not a more royal one, where we have Shiva and Parvati in this affectionate position, sitting on top of the mountain that they live at the top of, and Ravana has... It's a long story, too complicated to get into, but Ravana is trying to bother them by shaking the mountain, and Shiva, as you know, puts his foot down and essentially crushes Ravana. Doesn't kill him, but overcomes him by putting his foot down. And what I wanted to point out to you is how the mountain is depicted in this relief. The mountain is depicted in as a step pyramid, reminding us of the step pyramids that are at the base of Cambodian royal temples, which all of these temples, these Cambodian royal temples, are understood to be mountains in some sense. That's one of their significations. And we can see the parallel in the representation of the mountain. I mean, we might not even think of this as a mountain. It looks like a step pyramid. We only know it's a mountain because the myth says it's a mountain, and they live at the top of a mountain. But the comparison, the equivalent between mountain and step pyramid is very strongly drawn in ancient Cambodia. Just read this, an interesting quote from Vidya Dehaja, whom some of you perhaps have heard speak in this hall. Contributing to the ruler's authority was the personality of the handsome monarch and his beautiful queen and their conjugal fidelity. Not that Shiva and Parvati ever had very much conjugal fidelity. And so this is what they are. And I'm strictly not joking, really, because we like these people, right? I mean, we're interested in them. We're focused on them, and the idea of the beautiful wife and the beautiful husband together as a couple, as a kind of ideal. We're all attracted to this, and it makes us feel secure in our government and in our lives to have these beautiful couples at the head of our society that we can look to as a model of a kind of stability and continuity and so on. I just have to say, though, that I feel sorry for this couple. I mean, imagine being told that you have to keep your hands clasped in front of you when you kiss your husband or wife. Both of them, they have to stay like this. They're manacled, their hands, poor things. The Obamas look much more natural, are able to look much more natural. Then there's this Angkorian inscription from 40 years, 50 years, 60 years earlier than our Shiva and Parvati that gives us a very important clue. The king, knowing the sacred order, installed two images, one of Shiva and the other of his consort, for the welfare of his two parents now that they had gone to dwell with Shiva in his world. So part of what may be going on is that our Shiva and Parvati may be may be intended to refer to not only Shiva and Parvati, not only to an aristocratic or royal couple, but to a ancestral couple, a parent or grandparent level couple. And respect for ancestral lines, of course, is not something that's important just in China, very important in Southeast Asia too. And the idea of staying connected with the ancestors, keeping them happy and feeling peaceful and so on, is very important. And so we can think about this sort of comparison. We don't know precisely who these Balinese bronze figures, later, of course, than the Shiva and Parvati. We don't know exactly who they are, but the tradition of them suggests that they represent an ancestral couple, male and female, and that may be part of what's going on with the Shiva and Parvati. Now, I'm going to stop. I just wanted to take a minute to say something personal, because one of the questions that always comes up about artworks, and it's an absolutely fair question, is why do we care? You know, what can they do for us today? And I just wanted to tell you a little story that I hope will resonate with you. 20 or 30 years ago, long before I worked at the Asian Art Museum, I came here as a visitor. And I had been studying Southeast Asian art as a graduate student and then in my career for a long time at that point. And, you know, it's not so, let me say, it's not so easy to get a job as an art historian these days. If you take an obscure field like India and Southeast Asia, it's not at all easy to get a job. So I had many moments of saying, did I do the right thing? You know, shouldn't I have been a dentist instead? When I came into the Asian Art Museum gallery and saw these, I was aware of them, but I hadn't seen them in person in a while. So 30 years ago, when I came into the gallery and saw them, I was kind of struck dumb. And then as I thought about them, I said to myself, yes, I made the right decision of career. So thank you, everybody.